Hey guys, today we're going to talk about induction and how to have a successful induction. I feel like being induced is like every first time pregnant mom's worst nightmare. I know certainly it was for me. I was terrified about getting induced and I wanted to avoid it at all costs. However, I want to let you know that it can actually be quite successful and it's not always the worst thing in the world. I'll share my story about my induction and the steps that I took to make sure it was the most successful possible. And then you can kind of take tidbits from that and infer that into your situation. And I'll give some general tips also. Just to let you know, I am a birth doula. I have 2 babies. I've had one successful home birth and one hospital birth. So basically I shared another video about my top 3 tips about having a successful hospital birth. So I'm assuming if you want a successful induction, you've already watched that video and you've already done those 3 things, which is be intentional about finding your OB, be intentional about finding your hospital, and having a doula. Now, if you've done those 3 things and say you're in a situation based on any number of reasons, there's many reasons that you could have to have and be induced, and you find that you're being induced, this is what you would do thus far. So in my situation, I had already found the best OB, I had my doula, I was at the best hospital, and I ended up, what happened was I was having pretty consistent contractions, not super painful, but they could potentially be labor. My doula was already there with me, and I called my OB and I let them know that I was having my contractions 6 minutes apart. And they just said head over to the hospital, and that's what I did. So I got to the hospital. They took my blood pressure. My blood pressure was super high, like 150 over 190 or something like that. And I was only 2 centimeters dilated. So they basically, my OB, they told me to go walk around for an hour, and they were gonna check me again, see if I was any more dilated. It was like 2 a.m. at this point. So like from 2 to 3, I was walking around, or it could have even been 4 by this time. I did my rounds, came back, they checked me again, still 2 centimeters. Oh, I was so disappointed. But I really did appreciate, because I had found a great OB, that they gave me that chance to walk around for an hour to see if I progressed naturally. Unfortunately, they had also drawn labs because of my high blood pressure, and it turned out that I was preeclamptic, so my body was exhibiting signs of preeclampsia due to elevated liver enzymes. And I didn't have a choice at that point. They couldn't let me go. I had high blood pressure. I was becoming preeclamptic, and they needed to induce me. And let me tell you, I was full of anxiety when they told me that, knowing that I was only 2 centimeters and I hadn't progressed at all. I didn't feel hopeful, and I knew that there was so many, variables and negative outcomes that could happen with being induced. And that's where I had my little bit of security, knowing that I had my OB picked out, who I knew would make the best decisions, and I would be able to relax and just trust. And I knew it was a great hospital, and I had my doula for support. So being that I chose such an amazing OB, they started me off with a foley induction. Now my OB was at a teaching hospital, and there was residents as well. So the person that did my foley, it was like one of her first times. She was basically practicing on me, but she did great. I was at Emory, Midtown. If you don't know, a foley bulb is basically like a balloon that they insert into your cervix. They fill it up with air, and basically it expands and it forces your cervix to open. It can be very painful. For me, it was not, and sometimes it can take up to 12 hours to dilate you. So my doula actually knew that while having the foley in, if I got up and moved around, I would have the best chances of it being successful. So they inserted the foley bulb and started the induction around 8 a.m. I did not receive any Pitocin. They did insert some misoprostol or Psychotech which is a drug to soften the cervix. So with those two things in place, I had my birthing ball, I had my doula, and I was bouncing, like intense on that ball. I was walking around, and I asked, one of the main things I did is I asked for intermittent monitors. So the nurse was pissed at me. She did not want to give me the intermittent monitors. And I was like, she really did not believe in my induction, but I was advocating for myself, as was my doula. And I was like, I need the intermittent monitors. I actually took off the ones they gave me because I couldn't move around. And I knew like it was still so early. And I was just like, they have this big thing around your tummy monitoring the baby's heartbeat, right? And if I'm just lying there, I'm not gonna dilate. It's just common sense. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I got up, got on that birthing ball, I took off the monitors, and I think once I had taken them off, she was like, whatever, I'll get her the intermittent ones. I actually got a new nurse too. I think I bothered her, but I was happy because at the end of the day, do you care if you bother the nurse, or do you care if you have a successful induction? You're advocating for yourself. It's you and your baby's outcome. So who cares? Who cares about the nurse? Who cares about their feelings? Like you have to look out for yourself. So I got my intermittent monitors. Apparently they don't like using them for whatever reason, but they have them, and a lot of hospitals do, and that's one of the things you can look for when you're determining your hospital. So it was great. I had my intermittent monitors on. I was on the birthing ball, bouncing, doing my circles. My doula had me doing different positions. So that's where having a doula is super handy. And the contractions got extremely painful just from the foley bulb. And within a couple hours, I think within 3 hours, I was already at like a 5 centimeters dilated, and the foley bulb like fell out. I think I got to like 5 or 6. And let me just tell you, that did it. Like my body picked up the contractions super quickly at that point. And I believe even if I had been giving Pitocin, I would have had a similar outcome. But I'm a huge fan of Foley induction. So just to let you know, I was already 40 plus 2, so it's not like I was getting induced super early. And that's again where I find having a hands-off OB who let me get to that point, who didn't push me into the hospital early, came in handy to me. So that's why finding the right OB is super important. I knew that my OB was more hands-off and didn't want to just push an induction early, because he knows, as most doctors know, that you're going to have a higher success rate the later in your pregnancy you are, because your baby wants to be born to term. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. So I won't get into that now. But so yeah, I got to about a 6. The Foley fell out and everyone was shocked. They were like, the Foley fell out? Really? They're like, it must have been a mistake. But when they checked me, I was dilated and my body was picking up the contractions super fast. Basically, from there on out, it was just intense labor. Like super intense. Yeah, just thinking about it's crazy. But let's just say super intense contractions. The Foley fell out around like 12, between 12 to 2, intense contractions, around like 2, unbearable, going through, like begging for an epidural, but it's too late at this point. I think I was like a 7 or 8, and they're just like, you're so close. My doctor was on his way, right? I saw my doctor in the morning, went and saw patients at the clinic, and then came back to deliver my baby. So I'm just like in intense pain, like, where's my doctor? So I was gonna do a cervical block. I did not want to do an epidural because I knew having an epidural would slow down my labor. I wouldn't be able to move around. It would slow down my progression of labor. And there's also risks with an epidural that I wasn't willing to take, such as, oh my gosh, sorry. There's risks with injury to your spine and things like that. Just the thought of having a massive needle in my back, I just didn't want to do it. I had delivered my daughter naturally with no epidural, no medication at all, so I was willing to do that again. Unfortunately, this time it was more painful, and I believe it was more painful because I was in the hospital. A home birth is very relaxing, and I was induced, which, even though it wasn't Pitocin induction, it's still, I believe, more painful because you're kind of forcing something. The baby is not releasing that chemical on its own that is naturally, it's like a symbiotic process between mom's body and baby. And when you interrupt that with an induction, I believe it's more painful. So yeah, basically I was begging for the epidural. I was begging for my doctor to come give me the cervical block. One of the residents ended up giving it to me. While my doctor was on the way, I was in such intense pain that they gave me fentanyl, which I regret taking personally because I just don't think it's great to ever take such an intense painkiller during labor. But I was in so much pain that when they offered it to me, I took it. I don't recommend it. Yeah, I personally think it made my labor worse because I had gotten to a certain pain threshold where I knew how painful it was and I was able to withstand that pain. When they gave me the fentanyl and you feel that high, that warm, fuzzy feeling, that no pain, it's such a drastic change from the intense pain of labor that once that pain comes back, you can't withstand it anymore. Does that make sense? Because before you would have been able to withstand it because you were already there, but once you go down and it comes back, it feels worse. So having been experienced giving fentanyl during labor, I don't recommend it. I literally curled up into a ball like this, begging for an epidural because I wanted something more. And they couldn't give it to me at that point. And it made my labor extremely painful. And I was also doing this, which I honestly think is something you do when you're high. Like, I wish I didn't do it. I was so vulnerable. My doula, I told her, she knew I didn't want it. I was like, I don't care, I'm getting it. And she listened to me. You know, at the moment I felt like I was in so much pain, I would have taken anything. And that is the reality of labor. You know, I went into it knowing that I'd be willing to take something for the pain because I remembered how painful it was with my daughter. And looking back in retrospect, if I was to have a third, I would not do the fentanyl. And I don't necessarily recommend it. But if mom wants fentanyl, then that's her right. And I'm glad that they have that available to give. Just personally, I wish I didn't take it because it made the pain that much worse. But yeah, so basically, being able to have the intermittent monitors, being able to move and bounce on the ball, being able to walk. I could not walk on the hallways during labor because of COVID. However, I was able to walk around my room. I had my intermittent monitors. And one of the best things that helped when I was in so much pain that I could not walk, I could not talk to my doula, I didn't want anyone to bother me, I did not want to look at that ball, is I just laid with my legs open. Like, you just have to keep your pelvis open the whole time you're in labor. That makes a huge difference. Or even just have a peanut ball in between your knees. It keeps your pelvis open. So even if you can't move, I was literally in the fetal position. Like, not a great labor position, but my doula just came while I'm in that fetal position in the hospital bed, put the peanut ball in between my legs. And just having your pelvis open like that is so beneficial for having a successful birth. So I got my cervical block. Within an hour, my son was born. Yeah, I mean, it happened very fast. So I was induced around 8 a.m. and he was born at 4 p.m. So it was a very quick process. But those are kind of the things that I did to have a successful induction. I know I had a lot of things going for me going into it, having been already at term and doing the Foley induction. But, you know, I just wanted to share my story. I made sure that, you know, I did all the things beforehand by finding the right OB, the right hospital, having a doula, and just being knowledgeable and willing to advocate for myself. And I think those things are so important. And I wish that every woman knows her options, knows what's available to her, and is able to advocate for herself. So if anything, I just hope this video reaches someone, anyone, a pregnant mom who's getting induced or worried about getting induced. And I really hope that this can give her the confidence and the strength to get through that induction, because you can do it. You will be successful. I believe in you if nobody else does. Birth is so intense, so scary. Getting induced is so scary. The hospital is so scary. It's all extremely intimidating for a mom. And I just want you to know that you can do it, and I totally believe in you. So I wish you all the best. If you have any questions, reach out to me at themamamystique.com. You can schedule a consultation, and I would love to hear from you. Bye.